Welcome to the Lee Kuan Yew School's public policy event, book launch of Dr. Kai-Fu Lee's book on AI superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. Dr. Kai-Fu Lee is the chairman and CEO of Sinovation Ventures and the former president of Google China. He's got a very long CV, so I'll just highlight a few salient points. Dr. Lee is president of Sinoventures, a artificial intelligence institute, Sinovation Ventures, and manages $2 billion worth of dual currency investment funds, and is one of the leading venture capital firms focusing on developing the next generation of Chinese high-tech companies. Prior to founding Sinovation in 2009, Dr. Lee was the president of Google China. Previously, he held executive positions at Microsoft, SGI, and Apple. Dr. Lee received his bachelor's degree in computer science from Columbia University and a PhD from Carnegie Mellon University. In the field of artificial intelligence, Dr. Lee built one of the first game-playing programs to defeat a world champion in 1988, as well as the world's first large vocabulary speaker-independent continuous speech recognition system. Dr. Lee founded Microsoft Research China, which was named as the hottest research lab by MIT Technology Review. Later renamed Microsoft Research Asia, this institute trained the great majority of AI leaders in China, including the chief technology officers and AI heads of Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, Lenovo, Huawei, and Haier. While with Apple, Dr. Lee led AI projects in speech and natural language, which have been featured on Good Morning America and many others. Dr. Lee has authored 10 U.S. patents and more than 100 journals. Dr. Lee has been a pioneer in AI research and has been in this business in the last 30 years. So without much further ado, let me call on Dr. Lee.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my voice is not cooperating today, so I'm going to have a guest speaker give the next slide for me.
It's a great thing to build a better world with artificial intelligence. 人工智能正在改变世界。
So this slide shows you the power of deep learning because it is built on deep learning technologies, and it could resynthesize speech by President Trump. And that was not him speaking, it was by the synthesis system. And the deep learning is a big technology breakthrough that can do the following in a single domain. Keep in mind, one domain only, with a huge amount of training data, reach superhuman performance. So when trained on Amazon clicks, it learns how to make money, the most money, from people entering the site. When trained on large amounts of President Trump's speech, it talks like him. When trained on CT of lung cancer and non-cancer, it learns to distinguish them from each other. And when trained on Go games, it learns to play the game of Go at superhuman capability. So that has been the most amazing breakthrough in the past 62 years of AI history. And in terms of applications, it's actually over so many fields. Many people get confused and think only robots and autonomous vehicles are AI. But actually the same deep learning algorithms go through these 4 waves of artificial intelligence. Let me start from the first wave. It's the internet wave. Naturally, that's the domain in which we collect the most data. And it's automatically labeled. We are guinea pigs, labeling every day for Facebook, Amazon, and Google. When we use them and click, it learns what you like and don't like. And then it knows what to show you. And that's how the websites are no better than you do. What things you want to click on, what things you want to buy, and can maximize revenue. What's more, each of the implementation of deep learning for internet websites comes with an objective function maximizer. So Amazon can choose to maximize revenue or profit. And Facebook can choose to maximize virality or minutes per user. So imagine the job of a CEO suddenly got a lot easier. And that's also why these internet companies are near trillion-dollar companies, is because they've had a lot of training data and this magical knob that helps them make more money. Now the second wave, it's applicable equally to businesses that have lots of data, to banks, insurance companies, hospitals, government branches, so on and so forth. Anyone who's had a data repository can now use it to apply AI to it. Take as an example at a bank. Whenever I meet with a bank CEO, there's always a poor person sitting in the back of the room looking very grim. That is the head of the data center, because that person generates no profit, no revenue, is merely a cost center storing data for archival purposes. But guess what? That data center and that person has just turned into a mountain of gold, because with all the customer transactions and history, a company, a bank can now optimize customer asset allocation, can help make more money, can help minimize default, can help detect credit card fraud. So that is phenomenal. And similarly for insurance companies and so on. But before you start thinking it is only to be used by traditional companies, let me show you an example where it can be used to disrupt companies. We fund an AI loan application, and it's an app that you download. And when you download it, you can fill in all the blanks, such as your income, your name, your workplace, and so on, about 10 fields. But also you're asked to upload your phone data up to the loan application decision maker. And that data isn't everything on your phone, obviously. It's only things permitted by iOS and Android. It's the same things that Facebook and Twitter take, nothing more, nothing less. And what the system will do is decide whether to give you a loan based on what you entered and what you uploaded. And so think about it. If you were to walk outside the National University and run into 3,000 strangers, can you pick 1,000 of them to each you loan 500 Sing? And there goes $500,000. What percent of default rate might you get? Very high, right? Maybe 80%, 90%? Okay, it's Singapore, maybe 60%. But still a high number. So guess again what this default rate for this loan app is. It's 3%. So how does it manage to do that? Because it has so much information from the phone that you regard as useless, but it's actually little bits of valuable information put together, correlated with each other to make a very smart decision. This obviously includes all the things you typed, but also how fast you typed it. That makes a difference, because if you're a fraudster, you're probably copying and type slower. Also has information like what day of the month is it? Is it before payday or after payday? Before payday is a good loan, after payday, not so good, because you were just paid. Why do you need money? It will also have information like what apps do you have? Do you have a lot of games? Do you have a gambling app? Do you have illegal apps? Or perhaps you have all serious knowledge apps. That makes a difference on your loan. What model is your phone? That makes a big difference, very big difference. And also, what's your contact list? How many people are in it? Are they real people? Is the person you call dad really your dad? So on and so forth. These are all things that can be found merely using the data you upload and what's available on the internet. So just out of curiosity, we asked how many such features are there? There were 3,000. And just out of curiosity, we asked, what's the least important feature? It turns out to be your battery level. So why does that matter at all? Well, if you're someone who has OCD, who plugs your phone in all the time, you're probably a little bit correlated with someone who returns loans. If you're someone who keeps letting your phone run out of battery, you're probably a little bit correlated with someone who defaults. So obviously, that is not an important factor. That might be 1/billionth of all the information that's fed in. but all of it is considered. And in aggregate, it's something no human can do. Moving on to the third wave, that's when machines start to see and hear and sense with things like cameras, microphones, heat sensors, movement sensors, 3D reconstruction devices, even in the dark. All of that gathers data that before was transient, non-existent, and now can be used to make smart decisions. To give you an example, you all know Zhang Xueyou, right? Jackie Chan. He's got a new name in China. He's the policeman Chan. You know why? Because in the last concerts he gave, over 20 people were arrested from the most wanted list because the stadiums they had cameras installed, and the cameras were connected to face recognition to the criminal database. And as a result, the police apprehended some number of people. To some of them, oops, sorry, your ID looks good, my mistake, please enjoy the concert. But to the unfortunate 20-something people who were actual criminals and who thought they could, for one night, sneak out of wherever they were hiding, enjoy a concert, they were caught. This talk is not about whether that's a great app or one that worries people, but it's about the power of face recognition. No human can possibly, even if you took the 1,000 best policemen in China, they couldn't possibly identify 25 criminals out of a field of 60,000 people in the concert, because we simply don't have the memory or the face recognition capability, and we get tired. The fatigue overcomes us, can't possibly do that. So these, hopefully the lone example and the example about the concert will show you that AI is far surpassing our capabilities. If you satisfy the requirement, one domain, lots of data. Now, in the third wave, also we'll have autonomous stores that recognize your face, your movement, your gesture, your intent, that you pick up this bottle of water and you maybe bought it by putting it in the basket and it charges you, or maybe you look at it with disgust and put it back. That indicates something. Turning an offline store with the same power as Amazon or online. Or maybe you drank from it, then the security comes out and says, don't drink from our water. So all these things are detectable now in wave 3, and it will automate a lot of things with smart vision and hearing. Wave 4 is robotics and autonomous vehicles. Most people know a lot about those already, but I can tell you, robots are actually difficult to do everything humans can do. I'm on the board of Foxconn, and I can tell you it's not going to be easy displacing people who make iPhones. That requires a level of dexterity and hand-eye coordination. However, there are many jobs that are stationary, repetitive, that can be displaced by robots. For example, watering plants selectively with just the right amount of water and fertilizer based on the growth as observed by computer vision, such as picking fruits, such as doing dishes, doing inspection on assembly line. So we're still talking about tens of millions of jobs, but just not very high dexterity jobs. And autonomous vehicle is, of course, the biggest of all breakthroughs that will change the way we transport ourselves, logistics, delivery. It will make life so much more efficient, convenient. It will make the air safer. There will be fewer cars in the road. We'll no longer have to buy cars, and it will be a lot safer, especially over time. Because one very important thing is more data makes AI possible, and more data makes AI better. So the moment that autonomous vehicles are launched, hopefully it's pretty safe. And then 5 years later, it becomes extremely safe. 5 more years, even safer. So it keeps getting better and better. So that's the fourth wave. Each of these waves represent something like 5% increment to the GDP. Also represent some 5% of jobs displaced. This slide shows you the key things of what makes AI work. Massive data, very good labeling, and a single domain. And usually you need a lot of compute power and some AI experts. So who has the AI experts? Obviously, America. More specifically, America with some British and Canadians are by far the leaders in the world. So why in this talk would I say that China has a chance? Because there are three very important observations to make. The first is there have been very few breakthroughs. So people generally assume there are a lot of breakthroughs because you read about them in the paper. But actually, all the breakthroughs that you read in the paper are built on deep learning or similar technologies. And deep learning is fairly well understood, and nor can we expect US to continuously come up with another big breakthrough. Because after all, in the last 62 years, there was only one breakthrough. Why do we think there will be 5 more in the coming years? Secondly, because the technologies are well understood, we're now moved beyond technology discovery and disruption. We're moved into taking the mature technology and applying them. Just like the early days of the internet, the discovery of TCP/IP, amazingly important. The building of the web browser, amazingly important. The invention of electricity, amazingly important. But there never was a TCP/IP 2.0 that disrupted everything. There was a 2.0, but it was a small event. There never was electricity 2.0 that destroyed everything. It was the 1.0 when the groundwork was done, and then all the application built on top of TCP/IP, of the browser, of electricity. So I like to say that deep learning is like these things. So we're in the era of implementation. Thirdly, AI is a very open domain. All that is known is largely in the open source. If you want to learn AI and take enough courses, all the open source is out there. You can build what you want to build. So companies compete on their speed of implementation and the ideas and how quick they can make money, not on the breakthroughs. Because the breakthroughs are done. We understand them. They're in the open space. Now, how does China build on these three things? Well, first, China has a lot of great AI researchers and engineers. They're not as senior as the American ones, but on this chart you see, of all AI papers, 42% have Chinese authors. 2% of all the authors are Chinese. And Chinese can innovate in these products you see. The Chinese used to be copycats, but Chinese have become equal to the US in the green stage, and now have leapfrogged to build $300 billion of value in the orange slice that you see. And the Chinese entrepreneurs, they're hungry. They're good at finding business opportunities. They work hard. They build barriers because they're surrounded by copycats. They have to build products that are uncopyable. The only uncopyable product is one that builds a moat around it. That's so hard to copy. So for example, Meituan's 600,000 delivery people and the infrastructure they built costing billions of dollars. For example, Didi going into buying these vehicles, leasing them, insurance, gas stations, that locks up the domain. So that's the Chinese method of competition. It's a very good fit with AI. They're built up over time. They're capital intensive. They raise a lot of money, and then they build a moat that's very hard to imitate. The fourth reason is China has a lot of money. A lot of money flow to China. AI, this is not government money, this is private money. And a lot of this money goes into funding Chinese AI companies. Chinese AI funding exceeded US in the last year. And as an example, these are the 5 of our unicorns. So these are AI companies we invested in that have become over $1 billion in market capitalization. And total value is $21 billion. And the newest of these companies was founded only 2 years ago. These are concepts that I think are unheard of, or perhaps not even believed in Singapore. But now you've heard it, so you should believe it. The fifth reason is the power of massive data. The right chart shows you the more data, the better it performs. In fact, in AI, we have a saying called there's no data like more data. Anybody care to guess who said that? A gentleman named Dr. Bob Mercer, the founder of Cambridge Analytica, a very famous, esteemed AI researcher who turned into additional roles. And so in the age of AI, if data is the new oil, then China is the new OPEC. China has not only more people, but also more usages. Chinese people use takeouts more because in China you can get food delivered to you from 500 restaurants in 30 minutes, costing 70 US cents per delivery. And that is the amazing thing that causes Chinese people to have more depth in usage. And that's where the data comes from. A lot of people in the West assume Chinese people just don't care about data. Companies trade data. Government has all the data. That is not true. The companies behave much as Western companies, but it's just that there are more people and they use the data more. In particular, I want to point out the use of mobile data is particularly important because mobile data is the most valuable data. It means you're paying for something. It's not just a click on a page, but you're paying something. It indicates you want something. And that can be used as a rocket fuel to learn a lot of great AI. And finally, Chinese government strongly supports AI. And Chinese policies tend to be techno-utilitarian, which means try it out and then regulate it only if issues occur. So with mobile payment, that may have been stopped in the US because credit cards may raise the issue that software companies can be hacked or can be fraud or can't be trusted with managing your money. But China would trust Alibaba and Tencent as long as they live up to their word. And they were proven trustworthy, so they've taken over the credit card space. And also China has an AI plan on the left side, wanting to be the global best by 2030. And then with that plan, each enterprise and each city may come up with a specific plan. So, for example, the state-owned banks, once the government said AI is important, they might procure some AI software. And city of Nanjing said, our schools are very good. Let's build the world's largest AI science park. And China decided to build a new city called Xiong'an, which has autonomous vehicle built in with top layer for pedestrians, bottom layer for cars, thereby avoiding the kind of accidents we saw in Phoenix with Uber Autonomous. So as a result, we anticipate that China will catch up with the US somewhere between now and the next 5 years. And that the most important message to take is that China and US will be by far the co-leaders in AI. Who exactly will be ahead really depends on a lot of things. This shows a projection China slightly ahead, but only in implementation. US is clearly ahead in research, so with new technologies invented, that could put US back in the lead. But what is clear is that in this race, there are not 3 medals like the Olympics. There are only 2 medals, and they belong to US and China. Who gets the gold remains to be seen, but there is no bronze medal. AI will create a huge amount of value, about $16 trillion net additional GDP, but it will also bring a lot of challenges. And due to the interest of time, I'm just going to cover one issue, which is job displacement. That is, with AI being able to do so many jobs, are all our jobs going to be taken away? Well, it is not. If we think about what AI cannot do, there are 2 sorts of things. One is creative things, and the other is things that require empathy, compassion, people-to-people connection. So if these 2 attributes separate all the jobs and tasks that we do, we'll find that in fact in the lower left, all the jobs will be taken by AI. And that's of concern, and we need to do something about that. But the jobs on the lower right is a perfect example of human-AI symbiosis, with the AI tool helping scientists find more cure for cancer. On the upper left, we will find that AI can be the analytic core while the human provides the warmth. For example, in the case of a physician, AI can do the diagnosis, but the physician connects to the user, to the patient, gets the patient to tell all the problems and enters in an AI engine and provides the comfort and confidence, thereby maximizing the likelihood of recuperation, but also making the cost of healthcare much lower. And then on the upper right side is where humans will excel in both compassionate as well as creative skill sets. So we do have some things to worry about in the lower left, but we also have a lot to celebrate on the other three quadrants. But the most important thing, I think, is if we look further out in the future, I think your children, for those of you who are students, your children, for those of you who are teachers, your grandchildren, they will probably enjoy an amazing life. Because by the time they look at the effect of AI, they will only see that AI has liberated us from doing routine jobs, allowing us to have a lot more free time to love the people we love, to do the things we're passionate about, and to have time to think about what it means to be human. And for those of you who are a little fearful of AI, remember it is just a tool. We're the only ones who have the free will. We will control the AI tools, and we get to write the ending to the AI story. Thank you.
I'm sure we will have a lot of questions in the Q&A, but meanwhile, we will let Dr. Lee rest his voice. In the meanwhile, I would like to call on one of the pioneers of AI in Singapore. She works for the Provost office and previously with the National Research Foundation, and she oversees, she's one of the people who oversees AI research in Singapore. Can I call on Dr. Sintia Teddy-Ang to describe to us what is happening in the AI field in Singapore?
After hearing the global perspective of what's happening out there with regards to AI, I thought it would be a good idea to actually share what is happening within Singapore. What do we do in terms of like AI in Singapore? And during this talk, I will talk about our national program in AI called AI Singapore. Okay, so what is AI Singapore really? AI Singapore, you can actually read our mission statement over there, to anchor deep national capabilities, blah, blah, blah. It's all the big words over there. It's almost sounding like a motherhood statement, but then let me just try to translate this into what it actually means. So it means that our government is actually forward-looking enough to realize, recognize the importance and potential impact of AI on our everyday lives. And then that we are then actively investing to build national capability in AI, driven mainly from R&D community in this case, because at this stage in Singapore, most of our talent pool in AI actually resides in the R&D community, to prepare our workforce eventually to be AI ready, and at the same time to exploit and reap the potential of AI as a nation. Okay, so AI Singapore is a national platform. It's anchored at NUS, but being national, involves all the universities as well as the public research institution in Singapore. And we also do have strong support from all our government and funding agencies. Okay, so before I proceed further on describing of what AI Singapore actually do, I thought it's good to actually reiterate the point that actually our national investment in AI is small. It's really small compared to the rest of the world. In particular, our government actually pledged up to 150 million investment over 5 years under AI Singapore. So given the small local talent pool and also relatively small funding resource, we have to be sufficiently differentiated from the rest of the world. So actually, how do we do this? So how do we achieve the maximum impact given the constraints that we have? So we think that we can actually do this by having clear objectives or end goal in mind in things that we do in AI Singapore. So this slide gives you the 3 strategic thrusts, or like we love to call it the pillars in AI Singapore. Being a national platform, we have to have something for everybody. So let me just go through each of the pillar one by one. I'll start with the left-hand side pillar and the right-hand side pillar. This is the easiest to actually understand, I think. So for AI research is for the researchers. This actually aims to, it's about developing next generation AI techniques, conduct fundamental research in the hope of like getting the next breakthroughs after deep learning. we hope. And whereas on the right-hand side, AI innovation, our Signature 100 Experiments projects actually aims to help our companies to to innovate and adopt AI technologies. So in the middle pillar, we have AI technology. Now my colleagues in AI Singapore and NRF might not agree with this, but I think this pillar, the main stakeholder of this pillar is actually our government and funding agencies. So why do I say that? So this AI technology pillar aims to demonstrate the economic and social impact of AI by solving pertinent national issues in relatively shorter, well-defined period of time. How we do this is actually by supercharging, or I would say it's almost like AI R&D program on steroids. Why? Because one, we actually set a very clear goal, objective, problem statement that we are trying to solve. On top of that, we also specify a clear, measurable impact that we want to achieve out of the what we call grand challenge that we are trying to solve. And thirdly, we give our researchers access to high-quality data to actually solve the problem. So it's really to put everything together, make it as seamless as possible, and help our researchers to actually address and solve the grand challenge that the nation is actually facing, and in the hope that we can actually then achieve both advancement in terms of AI, at the same time also demonstrating the return of investment in the R&D that we actually do. Okay, so I'll go through each of the pillars one by one. So for AI research, it's about investing in research vital and strategic to Singapore. So the question we ask are the things like, what are the gaps in the current AI technologies? How can we actually improve AI techniques to go beyond deep learning? Because we know that right now, deep learning, although it actually is actually very matured and it can actually can solve and be useful in many applications, but we all know that human actually is not learning the way that deep learning actually learns. Human does not need to actually look at 1 million images of books to actually know that it is a book, and we also have ability to actually generalize our concepts. So there are actually much room for improvements for our researchers to actually explore what is next beyond actually deep learning. Okay, at this point, I thought it's actually good to give some sense of the state of AI research in Singapore. So overall, we do have a small pool of high-quality researchers producing high-quality research output. In fact, we actually rank first in terms of in the world based on citation impact of our R&D publications. And in fact, IEEE intelligence systems actually AIs tend to watch in 2018. 4 of them are actually based in Singapore, the researchers. Okay, this is actually the roadmap for R&D in AI Singapore. We are a small player in terms of funding size in the research arena, and therefore it's actually important to invest selectively, and we should actually place strategic bets. We feel that 2 areas that we can play best in are, first one is actually learning from small data set. Given the size of Singapore, our data sets are relatively or usually small, but higher in quality, so we try to actually leverage on that. And on the explainable AI, because we feel that our government are actually very receptive of AI innovation, and we could possibly actually lead in nationwide adoption of AI technology. And to capitalize on this, we should invest on explainable AI. Okay, so the AI technology pillar aims to use AI to tackle national problems, national challenges through our AI Grand Challenges project. So what I mean by Grand Challenge? So Grand Challenge, the criteria that we actually set, there are 3. First, it actually has to be inspiring for the researchers. It has to be interesting enough for the researchers to want to actually solve the problem. It has to be impactful, because if not, then it wouldn't be actually a Grand Challenge. And finally, it has to be measurable. So the 3 potential application domains that have been identified for the AI Grand Challenge are healthcare, urban solutions, and finance, all of which capitalizes on our unique ability to pull together large, unique, labeled data sets to support AI training. So we have recently launched our first grand challenge sometime in June this year. The grand challenge is actually in health. The statement is provided there. How can AI help primary care teams to stop or slow disease progression and complication development in 3H meaning the 3 high, the high cholesterol, high blood glucose, and high blood pressure. And by 20% in 5 years. So that there are clear, measurable goals or outcomes. Why we chose this problem statement is because it's actually top 3 chronic diseases in Singapore. It's also top 3 causes of polyclinic attendance, and top 3 in also in 18 to 69 years age group. And we also estimated projected the residents with 3H to reach 1.5 million in 2020. So this is actually a timeline. So we have just finalized the selection of the teams that are going to participate in the grand challenge, and we are hoping to actually do announcement sometime in January. So stay tuned for that. Okay, then finally, the last pillar is actually the AI innovation pillar. The mission is actually to accelerate industry adoption by proving business value of AI. So under this track, we have our flagship program we call 100 Experiments, where we actually bring together a team of AI researchers and AI engineers to solve industry problems. And at the same time, train AI manpower for the companies. So the aim is actually to come up with a minimum viable product within 9 to 18 months for the companies based on their problem statements and data. Then finally, for the companies, we also feel that there is a need to actually develop AI talent, in particular AI engineers. So we do have talent development programs for industry. I start from the bottom. We have what we call AI apprentices program, or AIAP, which actually aims to train AI engineers who are able to design, develop, and deploy AI applications. That's that's the target number that have been set for us. And then moving on, we aim to train 2,000 engineers who actually understand and can use AI actually appropriately and be able to actually program basic AI program, and that's our AI for industry, or AI for I. And finally, we also have a program called AI for Everyone. That is actually basically trying to bring AI to the masses, so that people are actually able to understand what is AI and able to identify potential use cases in their daily life. Okay, lastly, these are the list of our industry partners, meaning those people that are actually having some sort of collaboration projects with AI Singapore. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Let me throw the first question to Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, you mentioned in your book that you said that universal basic income is not the solution to these problems. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Universal basic income is the idea of just giving everybody money. That's a very simplistic approach. And first of all, where do you get the money from? For the United States, it would cost $3 trillion. And who's going to pay taxes for that? So to begin with, you have to be selective in how you redistribute income. But I think what is really missing, more importantly, is the fundamental issue that it's not just a loss of income, it's a loss of meaning. So when AI displaces jobs that are routine jobs, the people have been attached to those jobs because that has defined the meaning of their lives. And when you take away a job, we have historically seen people with 12 months of unemployment, even though they're on full social welfare, have dramatically higher depression rates, suicide rates, substance abuse rates. So whether we like it or not, our generation and your generation are now many people believe that work is the meaning of their lives. So there is no way you can solve the problem, even if you had money to give to people and just say, you're 35 years old, you're no longer needed, here's $15,000 a year for the rest of your life. That's going to lead to terrible problems. I think the only solution, given the way work is perceived in the society today, is to responsibly retrain people so that they can be gainfully employed and find again the new meaning of their lives.
All right, thank you. We have two microphones to the left and to the right. Please keep your questions short and to the point.
Hi, my name is Min Do. I work for a venture capital firm as well. I have a kind of a two-part question. Given that China presents a kind of maybe what I even say authoritarian perspective on how to govern people, should China be an AI superpower? Especially given that humans' imprint on the creation of AI is so prominent, right? We've seen many studies on how when we create AI, it brings with it, let's say, racial or sexist biases, et cetera, et cetera. So should an authoritarian government be an AI superpower? And the second part of that question is, what does it really mean to be an AI superpower? What are the actual repercussions? What does it look like, let's say, when China becomes an AI superpower? What does that mean for the rest of the world? Does it mean is it merely that it absorbs the economic impact, just like, say, when the U.S. became a steam power economic or electricity superpower?
Okay.
Right. So what are the repercussions for that?
When I say superpower, China superpower, I'm talking about the companies in China. Just like when you say U.S. is an AI superpower, we're not talking about the U.S. government as an AI superpower. We're talking about Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And in the case of China, we're talking about the AI giants that are emerging. Both the internet giants like Tencent and Alibaba, but also some of the unicorns we're creating. So I don't want to connect the state with the companies. We're talking about the companies. And I think there are a lot of assumptions that China as a state commandeers all the data, therefore it can do whatever it wants. That's just not the case. I think you should go to China and you will see that the Chinese companies operate much like American companies. They have to be responsible in using the data, otherwise the users will challenge or uninstall their application. So I'm speaking as a commercial venture capitalist, and my comments are about the companies. So I don't think I'm in a place, nor are any of us, to ask theoretical questions that we have no impact over.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. If we look at the history, look back to the history, every industrial revolution caused a global power shift. So now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. AI is just a part of the revolution. So do you think China will overtake US in this revolution? And can you briefly tell us the difference of the innovations and the communist China and with the capitalist US?
Okay, so if I answer China will overtake the US, Trump government will say, that's evidence we should escalate the trade war. And if I answer, no, China won't overtake the US government, the Chinese government will say, hey, how could you say that? So it's a no-win answer. But nevertheless, I think it's really hard to tell. I think Chinese innovation is different. It's more about tenacious, winner-take-all, data-driven, market size-driven, government-supported type of building of basically very powerful companies that build moats that are very hard to cross and create companies that are very hard to copy. That's the Chinese model. The American model is more visionary, changing the world, keeping it very light, and basically frown upon copying. So I think the answer to the question is which of the models are more applicable in the future, because I don't think China will get very good at the US model, nor will US become very good at the China model. And that's why it's kind of hard to answer.
Thank you.
The gentleman here.
Hello, my name is Felipe Males. I am an indigenous economist from Ecuador in South America. So I have a question about the AI. So how do you think the ID will impact in our economic and social topics in developing countries? And the second question is, what should we do to reduce the impact in the economic and social and cultural aspects? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think the implication is that if there are only 2 winners out of the AI competition, that means they take 90% of the profit or the market cap. And then surely countries like, EU, UK, Singapore, and Israel, Canada will take a lot of the rest. So that leaves very little for the developing countries. And that is a big worry. And in my book, and as well as my recent article for Bloomberg New Economy Forum, I talk about it. I think it's more important than ever to find the smartest people in developing countries and make sure they get the best education so they can come back and change the future of the countries. Secondly, I think it's important for each country to figure out what's special about it, that it won't just be dominated by US or China. For example, Indonesia, the company called Gojek is a motorcycle delivery company, completely different from Uber, because Uber is very hard to get from anywhere from Jakarta. In Jakarta, if you've been to Jakarta, you see the traffic jam is 3 hours wherever you go. So the only way you can get anything anywhere is by a motorcycle that goes through the cars. So Uber doesn't know that. Didi doesn't know that. So Gojek quickly grabbed the place and says, I understand my country better. So that kind of country-specific innovation, I think, is another possibility. But I think we have to also recognize another very bad news for developing countries, which is that the China model, the old China model and the old India model probably won't work for much longer, maybe 5 more years. Because China, it basically did manufacturing outsourcing for US. For jobs US didn't want, China did it cheaply and then made money to crawl out of poverty. India, because of its English-speaking population, did outsourcing, basically call center, IT outsourcing. And those were jobs Americans didn't want, but they paid okay, and that helped India crawl out of poverty. But those jobs, by the very nature, they're outsourceable to another country, they're certainly outsourceable to AI. And because they're largely routine, those models won't work for developing countries. So it's incredibly important that developing countries, unless they're already like Vietnam, already well on the way of taking manufacturing away from building China, then they can keep going for a number of years. If a country is nowhere in that scene and want to develop the China model or the Indian model from scratch, I really caution they think very carefully. In the future, the only things that can potentially be outsourced is service. So think about how to do service outsourcing, not call center, not IT, and not manufacturing.
Thank you. Dr. Lee, going back to your point about AI superpower rivalry, what advice can you give to small players like Singapore, who would be left with the crumbs in this superpower rivalry?
Well, Singapore has a number of advantages. It is one of the very few countries that can attract an average IQ higher, disproportionate from its population. Right? U.S. has that power. Singapore has that power because it's a magnet. You have immigration policy. You're welcome immigrants. So smart people come here to study or to work, and many stay. Some go back, but many stay. So how to leverage that higher IQ, I think, is going to be very key. That's an advantage. Singapore has fantastic financial community. Temasek, as well as the markets, are excellent. And I think Singapore occupies a unique place in Southeast Asia, which is a large market, despite Singapore being a small one. It's a messy large market. because it's not same language, same government, same culture. In fact, there are substantial disagreements, but nevertheless, it is a region that is sometimes able to work together. So it's a possibility. And Singapore has a strong China connection because of the large Chinese population. So I think the key is how to use these 4 features built on what was presented earlier on the Singapore plan, and I think make a bolder step. What you've done is great in the foundation, but the question is, can you make a bolder step of saying, we're going to take that bronze medal, and here are all the things we're going to do? Because what you've done is very good. I think all the basics are done. There are no errors, no mistakes. You've covered all the things there's to be covered. But can there be one moonshot that will propel Singapore to that bronze medal? That would be the question.
In other words, is there another Joseph Schooling for AI in Singapore?
Yeah, I have a follow-on question on this topic of Singapore. I mean, Singapore being small, we need to selectively invest in our in AI. So, with all the monies that are pouring into AI, both by public and private sector, how do you think the public sector, all this academic R&D, should actually differentiate ourselves from the industry so that we can't compete with the industry in terms of R&D? So how should we actually position ourselves to support the industry and to invest in?
Okay, I'll give a 2-part answer. One on the ecosystem side, one on the public sector research investment side. So first on your main question, when you want to support great research in Singapore, there are sort of 2 paths. One is to encourage great research that is just great. That is the next deep learning. The other is to practically train a lot of people. I saw both aspects. And obviously, you need to do some of each. But I would say the second one is a lot more scalable. And I think any country can still put out a claim on that. As an example, in my company, we trained 300 students in 5 weeks, at the end of which they were building amazing AI demos and systems that actually some began to be deployed in real scenarios. So the speed to train, so I think if you look everything, I think everything should be done with a long visibility to the future. And one thing that is clear is the barrier of entry to AI is getting lower and lower and lower. So given that, if you want to follow the trend, how do you make the numbers you have even 10 times bigger? And how can that set of people, can Singapore attract, train, retain these people wherever they are? Imagine the training we had for 300 people could probably be done for 20,000 people. If you created the world's largest training camp in AI and then offered the top graduates a citizenship, maybe that's too much, but giving you ideas.
That's a good idea.
Or another idea is go to America, look for all the AI PhDs who can't get visa, give them all a citizenship. I think that's what I mean by a moonshot. That is big. And the other point I wanted to add that you didn't ask, but I'll add anyway, is that, you all know Forrest Lee, right? Garena. So you need more people like him. I think he came to Singapore kind of serendipitously, but you need to go and grab these people to Singapore because the entrepreneurial community organically isn't easily going to produce 5 or 10 Forrest Lees and grabbing them. Similarly, you need to grab like 5 or 6 really good VCs. Don't go for numbers, go for the super top ones. Look what happened in China, right? In the very early phases, it was Neil Shen and Hugo Xiong who invested in Pony Ma. these were what sowed the seeds of Chinese entrepreneurialism. VCs, brilliant, amazing VCs, helping brilliant entrepreneurs grow, who help in turn for the VCs to grow. So, I mean, you have Temasek, you've got the late stage covered, but the early stage, you got to start from the beginning and sow the seed.
Right. Okay, thank you. Gentleman here.
My name is Daniel Wagner. I come from New York, and I'm also the author of a new book on AI. It's called AI Supremacy, which is all about the race between companies and countries. I agree with you, this is a race between two countries, largely, the China and the US. And my question is, there is a certain amount of responsibility that is attached to being a leader in this arena. And I'm wondering what your views are on the Chinese government's responsibility and companies' responsibility to develop AI responsibly, and specifically vis-a-vis the development of China's social credit system.
I think every country and every company should have the same responsibilities as whatever country, whatever companies they're in. And I think the Chinese companies are beginning to recognize that responsibility. That's why Baidu entered Partnership for AI. And that's why I'm participating as the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Council for AI. So that is happening. And I also see Chinese think tanks, and I understand NUS is working with Tsinghua on some of the projects about AI impact on society. So these things will happen. With great power comes great responsibility. So I'm fully confident that will come to pass. Social credit system, I know very little about it, other than what I read in the media. I had a session with a lot of Chinese people, and I asked them, how many of you know what it is? Nobody knows. So until it's rolled out, I think it's probably unfair to assume the worst. But once it was rolled out, I'll be happy to discuss it. I don't know what my rating is. I don't know if there is a rating. I don't know if it's for credit only or for something else. Based on what I could gather, it's largely for getting loans and approvals and equivalent to the function of something like an Equifax in the US. It just happens to be state-run and not privately run. But it may be more than that. I know the documents say more, but we'll see when it's implemented. I hate to speculate something that may or may not be implemented.
Okay. For now, it's a fake news.
No, I think it's real, but we just don't know what it is. It's not implemented yet.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Li. My name is Hai Yi, NUS researcher. So my question is regarding AI education. Because I'm graduated from social science background, sometimes I feel really stressed because I know technically I don't know how to contribute to AI, and then the AI trend will replace some of the jobs. So I want to know, do you have any tips that people like me can identify ourselves and engage us in the AI trend, going beyond just being users or even database? Thank you.
Sure. Read my book. I'm actually serious because I think it is one of the few books that can really be understood by anyone without technical background. Once you read it, I think it gives you the basis to see how far you want to pursue. I think it's important that everybody has an understanding of what AI can do, the benefits and the dangers. I don't think everyone has to go into the details, which is why I worry about the many books that have been written. When they're written by AI non-experts, they often have mistakes in them. When they're written by AI experts, they're often hard to comprehend. So one of the reasons for writing the book is to write an accessible book that will give you a good introduction. So please do that, I'm serious.
Thank you.
Dr. Li, to follow up on this, the broader question about the implications for our education model. Our education model was built on a pre-employment basis. So what are your thoughts about the future of education in this world of AI and these disruptive technologies?
Well, I think young people will have to focus much more on things that AI cannot do. And that is creativity and the ability to learn. strategic thinking, and also compassion, communication, empathy. So these are the foundations of what's most important. Any rote learning that you have done will definitely be better done by AI. It doesn't mean you don't want to do any rote learning, because you got to learn something, memorize something before you can start to create. So I think if we just keep in mind that AI is a good tool, that it can help us deal with quantitative routine tasks, and that we should do things beyond that, including in education. For example, we are big investors in not just AI, but education. We invest in many education companies that try to let teachers do what humans do well, and then outsource what AI and technologies can do. For example, one teacher can teach a class of 1,000 if the students interact with a clicker. For example, exams are better given on a personalized, targeted basis by machines and graded by machines. Same with homeworks. For example, AI is better at being your English pronunciation corrector than humans can't afford it. And AI is better at drilling on math problems where there might be inadequacies. So when we offload these from the teachers can do what teachers do best. That is being a person-to-person mentor, a very personal, trusted friend and teacher who can help the students answer personal issues and give personal advice. So I think that's kind of the direction I want to see.
Okay. Dr. Lee, thanks for your lecture. I'm a PhD student in the mechanical engineering. My research focus on the 3D printing and the biofabrication is more relevant to the experiment. So my question is that how could we improve our research if our research is not in the AI area or the deep learning is
mechanical engineering?
Yes.
It's absolutely related. All the future of robotics, automation, factories, manufacturing, it is the big issue, challenge, and bottleneck. It is why the robotics don't work as well as they do. So we very much rely on you.
Yeah, I think many researchers, their research area focus on for example, the biological experiments or the material synthesis. So it's more relevant to it's more experiment based. So for the researchers in this area, how do they improve their research or to be a better researcher?
Well, every scientist can use AI as what AI is good for. It's good for data analysis, good for filtering ideas, good for trying numerically all the possibilities, trying to research and analyze what's out there. And the human is good for setting hypotheses and proving them, and their intuition and their knowledge and wisdom, and collaboration across domains and translating from other domains. So there's a natural synergy.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Andy from the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center. Part of the work that I do at NVPC is to build an open, intelligent platform to allow people to come in, to give and to contribute to Singapore in many different ways. And then by doing so, we then collect actually all these data and help every individual in Singapore ultimately to be able to build their own giving journey. So this whole aspect of AI and data is very relevant to what we do. And the reason I'm doing this is that because, I agree with you that actually in the coming years, we will have greater means to live, but not the meaning to live for. And, we'll be smarter, but not more human. So through giving, we hope to then create a caring and inclusive society, for our future. My question then is that what I'm doing actually, while it is actually for a good intention, but I will still be, in a way, using technology to shape and manipulate people towards actually, hopefully, to build a better person. I would like actually your views on that, especially relating to the aspect of ethics. Because if we now start taking all these bio data, info data, and actually combine them together and shape people, even if it's for a good reason, is that something that, you know...
So AI and ethics.
Yes.
So can you repeat the question precisely?
Yeah, the question is that, you know, in the work that I'm doing, I'm actually trying to shape people for the future, which is actually towards building a caring and inclusive society for Singapore. You know, so this aspect of shaping...
Just ask the question.
Much too big
Okay,
a
so
goal.
the aspect of shaping people is actually manipulating.
Well, shaping people is a very dangerous thing. That's what Cambridge Analytica did. So I think, you know, I understand your institute is doing a lot of research. You should work more with NUS on how things like that can be done. You should study how people have done things like marketing and influencing people to buy a product. And I think that's the same kind of technology that might be extrapolated to teaching people to be more inclusive, right? I mean, AI basically is just a tool. You need to give it some objective function to satisfy. So what you've described is a little bit too high level. I think you need to get down to, you know, how do you measure someone's so-called inclusive activity? And what are your actionable things that can change that? So you can't just talk about AI at the grand level. You have to have specific content steps to execute based on people's measurable things. Then you can connect them together.
Okay, we have time for one more question before we wrap it up, please.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Lee. It's very interesting to see, like you mentioned, there's different models. For example, the U.S. model, China model, and the Indian or even the unique Singapore model. And you mentioned like U.S. model is more research-driven, and China model is more like data-driven, application-driven. And so in the era of rising of the AI, and I watched your video before, and you mentioned like it would be an ideal case if all these countries can join together to cross the country boundaries. But how like they can come together to cross such a boundary? And what do you think like human can benefit from this kind of ideal world cooperation?
Okay, I think we need to more than ever come together, but the forces of nature seems to be moving in a different direction. And why do we need to come together? Because the strengths are different. I think China knows how to build, Chinese companies know how to build a very strong winner-take-all, centralized system that wins against competition. That's a very knowledgeable thing and tested in the Chinese market. Americans know how to innovate and come up with new ideas no one has ever thought of before. So in a hypothetical world, if I were an investor and I could get 50% US money, 50% Chinese money, 50% US founders, 50% Chinese founders, we can build the most invincible company that can make a lot of money for human good, right? Also, there are a lot of different practices that might be very valuable as we face these challenges brought about by AI. We talked earlier about developing countries, how to have a gifted and talented education. And perhaps Korea is a country that has done the best in this space. And we talked about new kinds of jobs, service jobs. Perhaps Japan has done the best in this space. Perhaps there will need to be craftsman jobs. Maybe Switzerland has done the best. There will need to be volunteers, and volunteerism can be good. And Canada may have done the best in that space. So there's a lot of room for sharing. It's just that it's both at a how to build a great company level and how to deal with problems of AI level. And there needs to be forums for sharing, given the countries are less likely to work together in the future than they have in the past. So I think it's incumbent on us as the private actors and the private sectors to try to do that now that the countries seem to go off in their own paths.
Okay. Unfortunately, many questions, very few time. please go and buy Dr. Lee's book at Kinokuniya. It's also available in Amazon, and you can watch him on TED Talk. I'm sure there will be more opportunities when we can hear from Dr. Lee in your next visit. So please join me in thanking Dr. Lee for his time.